So Jonathan, I'm going to hand over to you now for our final introductory presentation, a topic I'm sure you're very passionate about, thinking about practical implementation, unlocking benefits, and managing potential risks.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Yes, indeed. Yeah, practical implementation. Always a question. What do we mean by practical? So I do have two slides as well. It's always good to guide the eye. So I'll try and share those, but I don't actually need them. So but it's nice to have something. Um, so let me give it a go. If it doesn't work, I'll give up. Yeah. So I just thought, let's try and break it into a few pieces. So when we say practical implementation of AI, we're doing it right now. Yeah, so I think this has been mentioned before, but AI already is in insurance, just in different ways. So the way that people interact with AI is at the moment through things like ChatGPT. So that's what we think AI tends to be. But actually, a lot of AI happens behind the scenes and is there to help us. So I like to bucket into three broad categories. So better customer experiences. So using AI to improve how we help customers, a personalized view of risk. So at the moment, that's more like AI-driven risk scores. Um, but in the future, it could be more proactive insurance. So trying to help people mitigate damage before it gets serious, so before it happens. And to do that, we have to think about new data. So the key skill there is to think about data, which we may not have thought of as relevant before, because the AI ultimately needs to see anything that a human would see to make that decision. And ultimately also new propositions. So especially in the future, we'll start to build products based around AI. So thinking again about that proactive element, products that have AI at their core. It's not too crazy, really. I mean, insurance has been the same for quite a while, but every industry has its disruptive point, and it's about being ahead of that. So a good example might be something like Uber, where taxis have roughly been the same for quite a while. You have to hail a taxi and all this sort of thing, but now we're all used to the idea that Uber can just sort of map a taxi to us, and there's no humans involved. It just all does it electronically, so it's seamless. So really, when it meets a customer's need, the AI happens behind the scenes. And how to actually make it happen, like there's a lot of things about making AI happen. But if we could distill it down into three and a bonus fourth point, the first one is so AI doesn't exist in isolation. So you have to think about what goes in. AI is really data hungry. So the more data you feed it, the better data you feed it, and the more often you feed the data, the better the outcome is going to be. And you can really think of it like a recipe. The better ingredients you put in, the better output you tend to get. So if you couldn't make the decision with that data, neither could the AI. So if the AI needs to know what's going on in a courtroom, for example, and the only way of knowing what's going on in the courtroom is to physically go there, it's not going to know. So and a corollary to that is also think about how it then gets used. So also at the end point. So how are you going to deploy the AI? So at the moment, what we do is we fit AI into the systems and processes we have. So I mentioned a risk score earlier. So like in Zurich, we produce a lot of AI-driven risk scores. And that's because a risk score can then be deployed into a rules-based system at points of quote. But and that's very effective, actually. But if we're going to think about the future where we want to really unlock the value of AI, then we're going to have to think about how we fit our systems and ways of working around the AI instead of the other way around. And the last thing is that people are really key, and that means a lot of different things. So uh, the value of the company is actually its expertise. Like the AI just unlocks it. And in terms of risk, the easiest, the best, most effective mitigation of AI risk in a company is having expertise. It cannot be understated. People don't generally go out to create an unethical model. Most unethical AI happens by accident. So having experts is crucial. And those experts need to work with everyone across the business all the time. It's not enough just to hire those experts and have them sit in the corner making stuff. They have to understand what's useful. And just to leave my last point, the whole point is you have to focus on the outcome, customer needs and business needs, and not on the tech. So don't try and think, I want to use this tech, let's do something with it. Think, I've got all this tech, but let's understand the problems and the goals and what customers ultimately want. And then maybe the tech can help. So there's a lot really. I could talk about it for hours, but I don't want to. But obviously, open to questions later. So that's me, Tom.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Okay, so just ask all of the speakers to turn their cameras back on, rejoin the virtual room, and we'll get started on our questions. So we do, of course, have a few to get us started, but this is your opportunity. If you've been sat there and thinking we're missing something, or there's a huge topic that we need to turn our attention to, this is the time to use the Q&A facility, which hopefully you've already located within the Zoom platform. Now, whilst you're thinking of your questions, I'll pass to Henry Morse-Davis to take us through some initial questions with our speakers. Really looking forward to hearing the discussion.
Thank you, Tom. So I think we'll kick off the panel session with a question around education and skills, but how do you anticipate the integration of AI will reshape and redefine the skill set requirements for insurance professionals of the future? And Neve, if we could go to you for the first instance.
Yeah, so I think anything that I'll preface it with is the fact of we need to have good AI products or tools in place with good data sources first before you even think about how it realistically changes the vast majority of your business. From a claims perspective, how I see it currently is I kind of split it into 3 different buckets. So I'd have the first bucket kind of being your empathetic claims handler. That's that skill set, that's the human touch of being able to sort of empathize, being able to have those conversations when people are in distress. I don't think we will get rid of that across all lines of business. I don't think we should get rid of that. So I do think that there's definitely a place for those handlers still. And I still feel that there's a place for your more expert, really detailed claims handlers as well, who've got maybe not years of experience, because I'm not someone who's come from years of experience, but who really want to get into the technical deep side of things. I think they will still exist. Their roles are still important, and they sort of will help to create the AI tools of the future. But we need their knowledge, and for them to almost audit and review as well any AI tools that do get implemented. The final group of handlers I sort of see, not so much handlers, but sitting within the claims function, are those developers, are those people who look after those AI tools. Those are people who are going to have a very different skill set than what our current claims handlers are. There's an opportunity now to either train your claims handlers, because they're people who have understanding of insurance or understanding of claims processes. Getting them into that side means that the product will, the tool will be more involved and understood by the business, but they won't have the full skill set. So yes, you're going to get some really techie people to come in and actually have those conversations and drive the products, keeping the bias and hopefully regulating all the sort of issues that I've sort of raised earlier. So from a claims perspective, that's how I see it. I don't think we're going to drastically get rid of everyone. You know, that's not what's going to happen. But we will sort of see changes in people being a bit more skilled on how to use and upload AI tools.
If anyone else would like to share their perspective, please feel free to jump in.
I can quickly say, yeah, it's definitely true. Like, the human element is crucial and will always be there. Like, you need human empathy. Like, in terms of skills, though, like, we shouldn't expect everyone to be able to build AI tools. Like, it's just really difficult, and you need specialism. So it's about balance, I think, understanding what makes good AI, what goes into good AI. But the skills, we always focus on the technical skills, but really it's about problem solving and curiosity, like being curious and thinking critically. Those are the skills that really matter. So yeah.
I think there are a few outcomes. Sorry, Henry. I think there are a few outcomes here, and it's hard to discern what they might look like. I think there's a tendency of the industry to try to generalize new technology and try to fit it in the context of what everyone's comfortable with, which is a sort of slow rolling change that we can all get our heads around. I think AI is different to other industrial revolutions in that it will happen faster, and in that it will affect white collar knowledge based industry first and foremost. I think if you look at previous industrial revolutions, they've affected workers. If you look at the combustion engine, look at the impact of that on the kind of horse and carriage industry, all that kind of stuff. This is going to be different, because in the future you can look at AI models, if they can start to chip away at knowledge based industry, and it becomes harder to tell people things that they can't look up immediately, perhaps through their Neuralink chip implanted in their head. What is the basis for expertise? What is the basis for legal guidance, for insurance guidance, right? So there's an outcome of this which is really good, which is actually our jobs become much more enjoyable, because it means that we can concentrate on our soft skills, getting out there and meeting people, the manual labor is reduced, and that's really nice. But there is an outcome to this that I think we have to be aware of socially, which is that we actually don't know what the outcome is going to be to that. Jonathan, you said, it's hard to create AI tools. Right now it is, sure. But at the beginning of the year, you might have said it was hard to create a generatively AI created advert of the type that Coca-Cola launched a few months ago. And look at that, right? So just in the space of 9 months, we've gone from people saying, actually, this stuff can't produce original content to it producing some content that could frankly blew everyone away. So fast forward 5 years, 10 years, who knows? But I'm not saying it's bad news. I'm not saying we should all panic. I just think that we tend to overestimate change in a year and underestimate it in 10. That's not my phrase, by the way. Someone else said that, so I'm pinching it from someone. But I do think that's relevant for us, and we should be aware of that.
I think this would be a good time to bring in a question from the audience. But one of the members, they work as an underwriter in emerging risk, and they ask, what advice would you give for someone who wants to pursue a career in AI? Is it more to do with tech ethics, AI ethics? And Mahesh, maybe we could go to you for the first instance.
Sure. So from an ethics standpoint, what we need to keep in mind is that this is all dependent on the data that's being collected. So Jonathan mentioned that AI systems are data hungry. So the proportionality, what data are you collecting? Do you really need all that data? What data is being inferred by the AI? And how does that lead to you as an insurer, finding out more about the insured, which you need not necessarily know about? What sort of personal data are they sharing with you? Is there like an information asymmetry that exists? The biggest ethical challenge is all about being transparent and explaining what you do with that information, whether it is from a model perspective, whether it is from the data standpoint, and how do you safeguard this? Sorry, so someone saying something? No. Okay, sorry, I thought someone was chipping in. So it's all about ensuring that you collect this data in conjunction with established data governance standards. How do you maintain a clear understanding that there's proportionality and you don't discriminate somebody unwittingly? So like Jonathan mentioned, nobody sets out to build an unethical model in the first place. It just happens. So what sort of guardrails, what sort of safeguards do you have? And are you embedding in best practices on risk mitigation right at the design stage and nipping it in the bud? That to me is the biggest challenge. And from a knowledge gathering perspective for somebody who's just starting out, I think what people need to realize is that the mechanics of building AI would continuously be evolving over time. But what doesn't change is that humans are going to use the AI for competitive advantage, to reduce burden, to bring in more efficiency in the scale. So long as the human element is baked into building the AI, I think we are good.
So next, we kind of often anecdotally hear that the insurance industry can be slow in its adoption of new technologies. Is this the case with AI? And if so, what can we do as an industry to rather promote the use of AI? And Jonathan, maybe if we bring you in this question first.
Yeah, we're not that slow. I mean, it's true that it is always the perception that insurance is a bit behind things like banking and certainly like retail. And there are, we're pretty used to some of the things that happen in AI with like shopping and Amazon and so forth. But yeah, how do we embrace it? How do we accelerate? The key is there's a few things. I mean, being aware of what the technology can do is number one, and not just aware of what it can do for you as a person, but how it might be able to work differently for a business, especially when you're like a commercial insurer. You're more focused on the business. But the other thing is just understanding what makes a good AI so that we can craft the right business problem, because ultimately that's the actual difficult part. I always say that we've got way more solutions than we have problems, and that's definitely true. The difficult part is asking the right question. Once you can ask the right question, you can answer it. So that's the skill. And I say if you want to focus, if you don't want to focus too much on the technical aspect, but you want to sort of accelerate AI, think about how you work out how to ask the right question, and that includes making sure that the AI has the right data and it can be implemented in the right way to drive value, but also understanding a problem that it could actually solve. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Would anyone else like to come in with their perspective? Sure, we'll move on. And I guess this is more a regulation liability point, but in what direction would you like to see insurers push for product liability reform? And Daniel, you're probably best placed to answer this question.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's no doubt, as I mentioned before, that there is a need for reform. That the consultation that was introduced this year has closed, but I've no doubt that this is going to come back at some point, whether under the current government or under a new government. Who knows? But I think it's going to be addressed again, and there will be further opportunities for insurers to have their say. The obvious answer, I suppose, is to push for the current government's approach of a lighter touch to regulation and a lighter touch to product liability, and a lighter approach than the EU is taking. The EU approach is very, very claimant friendly, and I think the UK government seems to be going in the opposite direction at the moment in terms of promoting the UK as a more innovative place, a friendlier place to do business and to develop AI technologies. That could benefit insurers: less regulation, less risk, less claims from their policyholders. Having said that, I've always got to have an eye on the fact that insurers also make their own recovery claims. They are often often insuring a middle party in the supply chain, and they don't want to make it too difficult for themselves to pursue producers if their supplier is on the hook for a product. I think the most obvious sort of example I often come back to automated vehicles, which is quite a stark example of an AI in practice, which has the massive potential to cause harm in the real world. What the EU is currently proposing, I couldn't help but read what the EU is proposing about product liability reform, and thinking that when motor insurers are paying out for automated vehicle claims in the future and looking to manufacturers to reimburse them, and it's something that a lot of motor insurers are worried about right now, because they know how tight-lipped manufacturers can be. They know that manufacturers aren't going to give up data willingly. If they had a tool like the EU has introduced, which basically says, well, fine, don't give us the data, but there's going to be a presumption that there was something wrong with your automated vehicle, then that could be enormously powerful. So in the one hand, a process, a sort of structure like the EU has introduced could be very helpful to insurers, but probably overall they would like a lighter touch.
Thank you, Danny. I think this will be a good time to shoehorn in a question from the audience, and we'll stick with you. But is the pace of technology significantly outpacing the legal and regulatory framework? And if so, is there some potential liability issue for users of AI systems?
Absolutely, yeah. That I mean, I think that's the big problem, is that no one can keep up, and obviously that's often the case. And it's kind of the point that I was making before. We've got product liability laws that are 40 years old. We've got didn't have this kind of thing in mind. The gist of the report, the government's report on AI, was very much, this is all happening so fast, it's all too complex, and we don't know what to do about it, basically. But one option is that we just let you get on with it, and we'll see where the land lies in a few years' time. I think there is a real risk that when we see the first claim that involves AI, the courts just won't know what to do with it, and we won't have the tools to decide those claims.
Thank you for that, Daniel. So we got another question from the audience. But what is the most effective way insurers can implement ChatGPT/AI for fraud detection and prevention? So Niamh, could you come in on this, please?
Yeah, I'm going to come in, probably be quite brief on it as well. I'm probably not the best person to absolutely answer this one, but there's so many different fintechs out there that are actually providing this service. You go out and speak to them. I know I was speaking on a panel recently, and they're even introducing into their technology the likes of, if a insured has got a ChatGPT tool to improve when I say deteriorate the look of their car for getting more in their claim, etc. So there's definitely providers out there that are actually looking into this and are specialists in it. So probably more of a conversation, if you're interested in that, go out and find and talk to one of them, is my personal perspective. There's obviously stuff that we can do internally, but if you're really concerned about it, they're the experts. I don't know if anyone else has got a different opinion on this one.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that ChatGPT is not a silver bullet. It's just a customer interface. It's an interaction interface. It's the engineering behind it, the plugins that work along with it. How do you fine-tune the model? How do you train it? How do you add your own custom data to it? That's what makes a difference. So you can't simply point GPT at your existing CRM database or your existing claims database and expect it to work magic. That wouldn't work. So ChatGPT is probably overhyped in that way. What you need to do is to ensure that you are building the right solution for the right kind of outcome, like Jonathan was talking about. So ensuring that you have the access to the data that will help you make the decisions, and ChatGPT can help you manage the customer interaction for that.
Thank you, Mahesh. So another question from the audience, and this is looking at, so AI can be used by any company, not just for insurance. So looking at this kind of use that everyone's using it for model users, how do we think insurance can cover the AI exposure of all companies? So that's PI, E&O, cyber. These all might be too broad to cover all the different exposures.
I can try and kick that one off. Look, I think it's a hard question to answer, right? Because I think there's an inference within the question that these exposures cannot be covered because they're too broad. I think that there are risks caused by AI that are distinct to companies that can be measured quite carefully, particularly as it pertains to potential liability that can connect back to a company due to use of models, where actually allegations around bias, for example, will be quite specific to the company. Other types of systemic risks, though, are worrying and will be quite tough to get to grips with. There is, as everyone will know on this call, a conversation in the cyber market about attribution relating to cyber war. One of the implications of AI, right, is that it becomes an accelerant to that conversation, because there is an implication where a rogue AI program that is combined with a Stuxnet type ricochet could cause unattributed and actually, attacks that are not undertaken by hostile actors or states at all, but undertaken by rogue AI. And the implication of that is kind of worrying, because we're not sure as to how we'll try and track those attacks and work out what's gone wrong. And I don't think we're that far off wholesale targeting of companies using AI to work out what the backdoors look like. The next step to that, just like in weapons automation, would be automating malware, ransomware, and I think that could lead to rogue programs going off and seeking out new targets on their own volition. Whether that would be the consequence of intelligent design or general AI, or actually just a targeted program that's doing its own thing and that no one can shut down because no one owns it, that's really where things get a bit more dynamic, I think. But look, like everything, on a high level, it's very hard to answer the question. I think if you get a bit specific about the models and the potential risks, you can start to break down, what can be accounted for in current products and then what cannot be. And I think that piece around what can be catered for and what cannot be is a market imperative. We have to work out what that looks like now. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves behind the curve, arguably like we have in other areas. And that's probably not acceptable given the pace of this change that AI is bringing about.
If I could just chime in quickly here, this might be a bit controversial, but what we've seen is that most technology errors and omissions products are silent on AI, which makes it incredibly difficult to come up with a strong opinion. and also the fact that AI brings in different types of security risks, adversarial attacks, model inferencing, data poisoning, all these, or prompt injections in Gen AI, all these newer attack vectors that come in, pretty much changes the cyber risk posture of organizations implementing AI. So you need to have a clear quantification matrix that allows you to quantify the risk at hand. So you know what's the value at risk, what's the risk modeling scenario looks like, what is the loss exposure, how does it look like, and how do you ensure that anything you do which has even a proportion of AI that's being consumed from a third party, because 70% of AI in the enterprise, to answer this participant's question, most of the AI that's used in the enterprise comes from third parties, whether it is off-the-shelf models, model zoos, or from the cloud vendors, hyperscalers. So you are pretty much using AI in your supply chain. And that is a bigger risk from a governance perspective and puts you at risk. And unless you have sufficient risk transfer methodologies and mechanisms in place, I think you are in deep trouble. So I don't know if the panel has any ideas on how you would work with existing customers who are using AI in their supply chain and help them mitigate those risks.
We are doing that a little bit, just to say, it's all about knowledge, I think, really, education and knowledge. A lot of it, but it's a complicated issue. But we have all the right skills in different places. I think it's just about bringing them together and understanding, how that can be applied and educated. So yeah, it's a moving issue, I think, but progress is being made.
Jonathan, moving on to a question on the audience about job displacement, but I'll read it as it is. So I think humans will be needed in claims handling for the next 10 to 20 years. If a lot of / most of claims start to become STP'd with AI, meaning fewer claims handlers are needed over time, hence fewer people pursue it as a career, will this cause a reduction in the demand for skilled labor in the claims handling function? So Niamh, maybe if we could go to you for that.
Yeah, so I can agree where you're coming from. The next 10, 20 years, we still need humans, etc. George sort of said it, of how fast technology changes in 10 years versus 1 year and stuff like this. And I go back to, I don't think we're trying to remove humans ever from working in insurance, working any jobs. We're trying to make their lives easier. So I go back to what I said when I was speaking earlier of having an intelligent assistant versus having a completely automated process. And it was another question that sort of popped up as well, of making the decisions. We always need that human involved as well. So yeah, I don't think majority of people think that they're going to work as a claims handler when they're a wee child. I don't think that's anyone's thought process. But I still think that when people come to making career decisions, actually what AI will end up doing is giving them a bit more of a niche, in a sense of, like where I said, of having an empathetic. So if your skill set is that you really like working with people and you can empathize and you can have those difficult conversations when someone's stressed, that's a claims handler role that's more developed for you and your skill set versus having to do some of the admin stuff that's related to claims. And again, in the different sense of it, if you've got a highly technical claim and you need an expert handler, potentially, I don't think has to come from a law degree, but like if I'm saying just in that background of it, you're going to have individuals coming from that element and they'll still be needed to help make those decisions. With any AI tool, we don't want bias. These tools are still created by humans. I don't think the tools are creating themselves just out of thin air. We are having to sort of input them. So we still need all that knowledge. So I don't think we will have a massive reduction in having claims handlers. What I actually think is that we'll have a better experience as claims handlers because we will reduce the amount of friction that we feel in the claims process. Underwriting may be different, but I still think you'll need handlers there as well.
And just to jump in there, I agree with everything you're saying. I think it's really hard to answer that question other than at a really high level. If you look at, again, going back to this industrial revolution thing, AI is a new industrial revolution. If you look at previous ones, there's always been a huge level of concern about people working in disrupted sectors. Insurance, just like every other sector, will be disrupted. Now, that doesn't mean it's bad down the line, because it may just mean that we have to be comfortable that we don't know exactly what the roles of the future will be like, except for the fact that they'll be different. It doesn't mean that there'll be less roles. It doesn't mean that there'll be worse roles. It just means that we can't necessarily predict what that looks like. But in every industrial revolution, whether it's the combustion engine or the internet, the same conversation took place. And those didn't lead to a reduction in opportunity. They led to new opportunities. So there'll be whole new industries and opportunities developed by this. So what I would say to people working in claims or any function in insurance is, your role may not exist in 10 to 20 years, but it doesn't mean there won't be other roles that people can do. It doesn't mean that you won't have a job doing something a bit different. I think in the near term, this tech will alleviate the pieces of your job you don't like. And that's something everyone can get behind, right? The absence of the requirement to rekey information or to assess tedious PDFs and documents, the digestion of information at your fingertips, to allow you to be more powerful and do more with your time. This is all stuff that will make your job even better. So, it's not necessarily dystopian, and it's okay for us to say we don't know what the shape of the jobs market is going to look like down the line, based on the fact that previous industrial revolutions have created new opportunity that has been hard to discern in advance.
Thank you, George. I'm conscious of time, so I think we'll move to our last question, and hope we can get an input from all the panelists. So please try and keep your responses brief. So looking ahead, what is your long-term vision for AI in the insurance industry? Do you see it reshaping traditional processes and or practices?
I'll kick off now quickly. I think there's definitely way it changes the products, parametrics being one of those, but I think George said it as well there. It's not about completely replacing everything that we're doing. It's about removing the stuff that causes friction in your life and making it easier. So that's what we should be aiming with the bulk of AI tools, and then that 20% where it's changing the products completely. Yes, it's my perspective.
Can I go next if that's okay? Yeah, I if you think 10, 15 years, I think it will be very different. Insurance as a concept. I think it all requires, it all has to rely on customer needs and what customers want. But if we look at what customers want from other products, they're very different even from 10, 15 years ago. So yeah, insurance as a concept, we're much more proactive, many more touch points, and all about helping customers mitigate risk before it happens through multiple touch points, including claims, but not the model we have now, where essentially it's almost like sign up and then you may never interact with your insurer again, in many more interactions, and about helping our customers to mitigate risk using AI, and the model will be very different.
Thank you. We could keep our answers really brief. We haven't got too much time left, but thank you.
I'll go next. So look, 1 to 3 years, I think the market's going to cater for these risks with existing coverages. We'll have increasingly good conversation about what the edge risks look like, and that will lead to a new specialism in AI insurance in the kind of 3 to 7 year time frame. Beyond 7 years, I don't think anyone can predict accurately what's going to happen at all.
Yeah,
thank you.
From my side, just 3 things: cost, quality, and value. Reduce the cost, improve quality, and significantly add value to every single value chain. That's what AI would do.
Yeah, for me, just lastly from me, my focus was obviously a bit different, but my sort of key takeaway is just to think about policyholders that you have, think about the risks that they pose, and what approach you would prefer the product liability reform to take, and also think about your current policies and whether they would cover something like AI within the definition of product supplied, for example.
Thank you. We'll just pass back to Tom for closing.
Thank you very much, Henry, and thank you all for the fascinating discussion. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope everyone who attended did too.